Alright, now as you can see, this has every buff overlaid on it. So you can really see here how your defensive cooldowns were working. This is really amazing tool for Death Knights who want to keep track of their uptime for things. So you can see how you were using cooldowns, like apparently right here we are popping basically every cooldown we had. Again right here there's almost no damage. And you can see how you cycle through your cooldowns. Here we had lined up a lot of cooldowns. It's really useful to see how you pull your cooldowns out and how you use them. I think I actually forgot Blade Barrier. There we go. And this is a very useful tool, very, very useful tool for tanks to check out what they were doing with their debuffs, what they're doing with their defensive cooldowns, and see how you can maybe better mitigate a fight. So that's it for tanking. Now for DPS, we're going to use October, who set a record for this Nef 10 fight for Feral DPS. And we're going to look at him and see what he was doing. So we're going to go to damage by spell, and we're going to look at his damages. And so right here you see we had Rip as his number 1, Shred, and while this order right here kind of has some significance, this isn't really what matters. What really matters for him being a bleed type class is what is his uptime. And over here you see 85% uptime on Rip, 92% on Rake, 25% on Mangle, and I don't think that's actually a valid debuff. No, it's not. But these are his 3 main debuffs that he's trying to keep up out of his damage rotation. You can see their uptime. This is really important for dot classes, and this really helps you figure out how you're doing and what maybe need a priority. Do remember this fight has a lot of movement and a lot of sections where they actually can't do any damage. So these uptimes are actually phenomenal for a Feral DPS. Healing by spell, really not very important. Damage by actor, again important as always. And then buffs gained. I'm not very familiar with the druid, so I'm not exactly sure what all buff gains would be important to track. But I know one thing that'd be good is to look at, what your Tiger's Fury and other uptimes on some of your cooldowns were. And trying to look through here. I actually can't find Tiger's Fury. There it is. So we're going to overlay Tiger's Fury, and you can see where he pops in. And this looks like he's pretty much popping it on cooldown throughout the fight. Basically popping Tiger's Fury every time it's possibly up. Managed an 18.7% uptime throughout the fight. It's pretty impressive. And over here you can see power gains, gains of mana, energy, and mana again. Only energy really counts for him via his King of the Jungle ability, but as you can see, we gained 840 energy from that, which is pretty awesome. This is a really interesting tool for keeping track of things like, for instance, Strength of the Panther from your Mangle debuff. He kept it up 91% of the time, only letting it drop during this, which is an air phase, and this, which is the phase when we're coming back down. And I'm not sure why it dropped right over here. But as you can see, he kept amazing uptime on it, only letting it drop when it wasn't in use. And this kind of tool lets you analyze and see what you're doing, and it's pretty darn useful. I very enjoy this tool. Buffs cast, basically kind of a different kind of version of the buffed gain tab, but important for him for checking out things like Fairy Fire. You can see Fairy Fire. Let's overlay Rake. Get away with these two up top. Rip and Mangle. And here you can really see how he was doing with his overlays. He kept Fairy Fire up almost the entire time. He kept right over here Fairy Fire up on 2 things at once on 3 stacks. That's impressive. Here you can see Rake, how he was raking throughout the entire fight. Here you can see Rip, how long he was keeping up Rip. And this lets you see when it was dropping too. And for instance, right here you see it drops. This is during the upper air phase. Here there's a long drop. That's probably because he killed his ad and was waiting for the phase to end. And let it drop once here and once here for tiny periods of time. And you can look through this and say, okay, so I had tiny little drops. I can try to figure that out. And for instance, right here he has a drop on Rip, but as you see right here, he puts up Mangle. And so you can see what's causing you to drop it on occasion if you look at this properly. And this is really cool. And this allows you to do a lot of cool things with this uptime, and you just hit these little hash marks over here, and it brings up the uptimes for you on an overlay. And this can really help people out who are trying to figure out how to do a rotation, or, for figuring out what in your rotation you need to change to make it better. This is also very important for even classes who don't have static rotations or debuffs that they keep up constantly. Like, say for instance, we got a warrior here, Galactic Hero, a DPS warrior. You can look over here and you can look at your breakdowns of your spells, and you can see kind of how you were doing with keeping up all your different things. And you go over to buffs gained, and while it's not as important, you go over here to buffs cast, you can see how your debuffs were being put on. Colossus Smash, you can see when you were using Colossus Smash up, when you were using your Deep Wounds, what Deep Wounds was being procced off of. This has amazing utility for anyone to check out how your DPS was doing. One quick thing I'm going to do before I finish off is cover out another topic, which is covering out how you look at individual spells. And this is more from a raid leader's perspective. So to cover out individual spells, we're going to show off how you can look at a spell and see who is taking damage. So for instance, avoidable damage like Lightning Discharge. So if we click it, takes us over to a damage breakdown of it. This shows that Outdated took 2 ticks of it, and his pet took 1 tick of it. Balgor is Outdated's pet for this fight, and the reason they're taking ticks is because they're the ad tanks for this fight. We use him and his pet to tank the ads instead of a typical Ret Paladin or, Death Knight. And it works out just fine for us. So they were wandering around and got hit for a couple ticks on accident, but that's perfectly fine for this kind of fight, and it doesn't really have any significant impact. This lets you look down and see, who's taking damage from what. Pop back here, go to Electrocution. Now you can see Electrocution, and you can see who's taking the most damage. And this kind of lets you figure out who you need to prioritize for healing. For instance, Hypertension took the most damage, probably because he's pretty squishy. Bucklow took some extra damage from it. Then me, followed by Outdated, everyone else pretty close, and then you got October, who takes for some reason no damage, and then the 2 tanks at the bottom. And this can let you figure out who's specifically taking more damage from AoE effects and who to focus on healing for those. This is just a brief overview. There's tons of more stuff you can do with this tool. This is just showing you how to break down it for your personal self, but you can look at all the fights. There's just so much with this tool you can do. It's amazing. It's amazing what you can do with this tool. Just flat out amazing. There's this dashboard right here, which allows you to go deeper into analyzing things, and this is very useful. This can be extremely useful for specific things. I'm going to cover it a little brief here. You have just compare fights, which lets you compare 2 fights. Very good for comparing, 2 fights that you wiped on, seeing what you could do better between the 2 of them. Analyze. This is where the real cool stuff happens, and where the most detailed part of this thing goes into for raid leaders to analyze. Basically, you can do by damage done, damage taken, healing done, and hostile healing. And I'm going to go into damage taken for a quick second. This brings up a graph here, and you can time scale this graph. It comes up with a little list here that shows you how much damage everyone was taking. If you hover over it, it will show you how much damage they're taking from each source. And you can sort by damage taken from source, by target, or by spell. And this is very useful for spell effects to see, for instance, uncheck everything but electrocute. You can see when all the electrocutes in the phase happened. And then you can see, let's go with tail lashes, see when the tail lashes were happening. And you can also go down and you can see when people are getting hit by lightning discharges. And this is a really useful tool for raid leaders to look through and see when people were taking damage from what, and by what was doing the damage. Also, you can go up to damage done, and damage done brings out a nice graph, and you can see who is doing the most damage, who is doing what damage to what targets with what spells, and you can click these little arrows here for pet classes, see the different pets that they were using, and this gives you some pretty good things. But the damage done by target, this lets you look at the boss's damage, see who they did damage to, and what they were doing. And this is just an amazing tool for analyzing different aspects of the raid's performance. You go over to Healing Done, and you can see what the healing done was. You can see the healers, you can see what their overhealing values were, what their HPS was for effective, you can see what percentage they healed, you can hover over to see their healing breakdowns, and you can uncheck and check them to see their healing performance. And this is an amazing tool. However, this is much more for raid leaders to analyze. For individual DPS, you probably don't want to be looking at this because this ends up having way too much information, and it's pretty intense on getting through. But yeah, that concludes pretty much the video for how to use World of Logs. If anything's a little complicated, feel free to give me an in-game message, and hope you all enjoyed it. Thanks. One last thing that I forgot to mention that I'm going to be cutting in after the video is activity time on the pages. This is actually something that's not shown elsewhere. It's only shown when you go to the Analyze and go down here, or not to Analyze, but to the dashboard navigation menu, which is now on Analyze because I went to Analyze. But it's only shown if you go to these subsections. And it doesn't matter which subsection you go to. You can go to the generalized one right here, which is that, or you can go to the analyzed one, which allows for finer tune control. But you can see your activity times, and your activity times are basically showing you how active you were at keeping up spells, either keeping up anything. You basically had to have something you were doing with all your globals, or have something running hot dot at all times to keep activity time. And this is very helpful for seeing how much you're getting out of your job. For instance, look at all our healers all at 100% flat, 0.2 extra because of rounding errors. But you can see that our activity time for healing, every one of us was always healing all the time. Now if you go over here to damage, you can sort by damage, and you can see the activity time of damage people. October is up 94, Galactic, Bucklow, and you can see the different percentages. Galactic and Brock's percentages are going to be really low because they're on a platform in Phase 2 that has the highest DPS. So they're add dice first, thus they don't get to DPS for very long, where October's on the platform where he's solo DPS, thus his add dies last, therefore he gets a little more activity time. But this is still very useful for seeing how active your people are, and activity times often makes the world of difference in DPS. The more activity time you are, the better your DPS. It makes a world of difference in healing as well. And this is a very important tool to master and learn how to use for anyone who wants to basically min-max themselves, is to make sure that your activity time is as high as possible. So yeah, that will be all, and I'm just going to tag this in at the end of the video.